CZ and Binance have been under huge scrutiny lately, both from regulators and from the mainstream media. First with regulators stopping Binance from acquiring Voyager. Then with the SEC going after BUSD that, at least in my opinion, seemed to be one of the most compliant, transparent and fully backed stablecoins. Then with Forbes creating an article comparing CZ and Binance to SBF and to FTX, and if that wasn't enough, with the US Senate and other regulators issuing a letter to Binance accusing Binance and CZ of several crimes. Certainly curious to see all of this happening at the same time. Either CZ is the worst man alive and regulators have recently found that out, or this is a blunt attack on CZ and Binance and maybe trying to shut down the exchange with some ulterior motives behind it. Well, that's exactly what we are going to analyze in this video, so stick around. Remember that nothing in this video is financial advice. This is just more of a reflective and educative video that I'm sharing with you, where I have an analysis and my opinion on this super relevant topic. I know that, as a matter of fact, centralized exchanges are not at all a conceptual topic in terms of cryptocurrency. There are many diehard crypto OGs that are not really fan of centralized exchanges and would prefer to have decentralized alternatives. I do as well, as you know by my name of this channel, that is Decentralized Nation. But right now, I do think we don't have good decentralized alternatives, alternatives that easily allow us to convert fiat into crypto and the other way around as well. So yeah, we need to be thankful and grateful for centralized exchanges because they play an important role right now while the crypto industry is evolving and while we don't get these decentralized alternatives that I do think are probably a matter of time. But of course, while we have decentralized crypto exchanges, we definitely need to make them accountable, and incentivize them to be as transparent and as possible, because at the end of the day, if there is lack of transparency and accountability, it's more likely that they will engage in the same kind of failures and risky activities of the traditional financial system. Risky activities such as using your customer assets to gain yield, such as FTX did, and such as the banks do with derivatives and with lending our money. So definitely it's important to not just disregard these actions from regulators and from the mainstream media against Binance, but actually go through them one by one and consider if there's a chance they might be right, they might be onto something, and do they actually have valid arguments, and if there are any other reasons behind this opposition and attack to CZ and Binance. So for that, we'll look first here at the objection of the SEC to Binance acquiring Voyager. Okay, the main justification is that they believe Voyager might have sold unregistered securities with their VGX token, as we can read here. In addition, they have also filed a limited objection to this deal, saying that they needed more details to ensure that Binance could actually afford it and where are the funds coming from to actually afford this deal. The curious thing is that where was the SEC and the objections when it was FTX making a proposal to acquire Voyager? In fact, FTX was the first company that was going to bail out Voyager. And when they said so and they made the proposal and Voyager accepted it, everything was okay and there were no regulators. But when Binance came to the forefront after the failure of FTX, then they put all these kind of issues and problems with Binance acquiring. Okay, it's a bit strange. Is the SEC playing favorites, or or they just got burned with the FTX situation and now they are trying to be extra careful, and if you join all of these together with the meetings that Sam Bankman-Fried and Gary Gensler, which were pretty close, were that meetings and that relationship they had giving special privileges to FTX that maybe Binance does not have? It's really a tough topic, And at the end of the day, the function of the SEC should be protecting the customers, And how does, delaying the bankruptcy project of Voyager and opposing to the only option and the only bailout proposal there is will protect investors. It will just stop investors from gaining their money back, and it will make just the whole process much harder and longer for the individuals that have in fact lost their funds with this Voyager bankruptcy. It's so fishy that even a US judge, as we can see here, Judge Wiles, even this US judge question this objection, very well said. He just asked them, if they are the debtor. As you can see, you're asking the debtor, that is Voyager, to prove that the cryptos being transacted were not securities, but they have not given any regulatory guidance, as to what things are and how things should be done in terms of cryptocurrency. So yeah, it's totally right. Instead of just going after the companies and trying to sue them, it would be much easier to provide clear cryptocurrency regulation for companies to follow, and then companies could actually follow it. Moving forward, let's look at the SEC going after BUSD. Okay, so as you can see here, the crypto firm Paxos faces SEC charges and is ordered to stop minting Binance stablecoins. So they cannot no longer mint any BUSD. Naturally, this basically doomed BUSD to stop existing eventually, because Paxos cannot mint any more tokens. They just can burn them whenever people want to redeem their stablecoin for US dollars, and they cannot issue more tokens even if there is demand for it. This led Binance to discontinue in a progressive manner the use of BSD as the main trading pair in their platform. And yeah, so basically the token is doomed to be discontinued and to just vanish from the face, as there will be less trading pairs, there is less liquidity, less market cap, that will keep on decreasing. And in fact, if we take a look here, you can see just how much the market cap of BUSD has already dropped. At the time of that announcement, it was around 16 billion, and then it just had a super sharp drop, and right now it's around 8 billion, half of it. And the great thing is that it was able to keep its peg, because I do think it was a super transparent token, super transparent stablecoin, where the assets backing the stablecoin were super liquid and easy to withdraw. So at the end of the day, it seemed to be the most secure of all the stablecoins out there, certainly much more than USDT and even much more than USDC. But I guess maybe having the support of Blackrock helps USDC, while Binance doesn't have any kind of support. As we can see here, this order was as a result of several unresolved issues related to Paxos oversight and their relationship with Binance. So basically, just because they don't understand how does that work, but it's very simple and it's very clear. Binance explained it before. Paxos issues a stablecoin in partnership with Binance, but they take care of everything. They take care of the issues, they hold the assets in their reserves, and it's their stablecoin, but just with the name and the brand of Binance. And then Binance uses this stablecoin in their platform as a pair for trading. In fact, it's also even said that the SEC would argue that Paxos is actually a security. I'm laughing because it's very strange. None of the arguments actually make sense, in terms of the first argument of unresolved issues with the relationship between Paxos and Binance. Like, that's super vague. You don't really know what it is about. What do they actually want to understand? As a regulator, if you demand others to be transparent and to be objective, shouldn't you also give an example and be transparent in these kinds of accusations and explain exactly why you're doing something? Just saying, "Ooh, I'm stopping this stablecoin because I'm not sure of the relationship." Is that a reason good enough? You should give actual reasons to enforce your actions, not just, "Oh, I'm not sure of a relationship between these two entities." Look into the second argument of BUSD being a security. How can actually stablecoin be a security? Right now in the US, to measure if something is a security or not. We just have the AWI test, and one of the conditions of the AWI test, and all the 4 conditions need to be met, is that there needs to be a profit expectation coming from third parties. Okay, stablecoins are backed by dollars, and they are the direct representation of a dollar in the blockchain, and they can be redeemed by a dollar. If dollars are not securities, and if there is no expectation of profit from just holding a dollar, how can a stablecoin be a security if what you're going to get for the stablecoin is simply a dollar? How can a stablecoin be a security? It doesn't actually make any sense. You can see it here. These are the conditions of the AWI test. And yeah, you do have an investment of money. Yeah, it is a common enterprise, I guess, just is a BUSD, but there is no expectation of profit, and there's nothing to be derived from the efforts of others because it's backed by the dollar. So yeah, there's no one besides the state itself, I guess. But even with the state or central banks doing their monetary policy, there's still other factors to consider, and that will influence the value of the dollar. So it doesn't really make sense. And if stablecoins are securities, then currency should be security as well. Then to just ride the wave and add fuel to the fire, we have this great article from Forbes, okay, talking about Binance asset shuffling that is very similar to maneuvers from FTX, basically comparing Binance and CZ to FTX. This article basically refers to a 1 billion stablecoin collateral transaction that went to hedge funds such as Throne, Amber Group, and Alameda Research between August and December 2022. And Forbes states that these maneuvers were very similar to the ones that FTX and SBF were doing with Alameda Research. But CZ, as you can see here in the second thread, came to Twitter and answered this article and stated that these were simply the hedge funds withdrawing their own assets, okay? And that's something that's normal, a normal activity of an exchange, and that was not being considered by Forbes, because users, regardless of who they are, should be able to actually withdraw their assets at any time, okay? And in fact, one thing he rightfully points out is that Forbes conveniently forgot to trace the transactions and to check in their research if whether this cryptocurrency was previously deposited or not by these hedge funds, okay, on Binance. And if they tracked the transaction and they saw that they in fact deposited that crypto, they could confirm that they were just getting their funds back, which is a totally rightful and it's supposed to happen kind of operation. So yeah, another third article that shows a clear intention, I would say, from the mainstream traditional media to smear and to create doubts about CZ and Binance, especially for people that are outside of the cryptocurrency industry, that are not familiar with our community and that are not involved, and that will actually read that article and think that Binance is just like FTX and it will fail. They won't want to use Binance. That is probably one of the best cryptocurrency exchanges and easiest to use that we have right now. And this is, of course, not good for Binance, but also for the cryptocurrency industry as a whole, as it becomes like a barrier to entry for these people, for people that are thinking about getting some cryptocurrency and joining the industry and learning more. And it gives a clear connotation that everything in crypto is a scam. And that's very negative for everyone trying to fight for crypto adoption. So yeah, we should definitely not support Forbes. Quite the contrary, we should condemn them, especially by saying something and not doing their proper research. And now, the cherry on top of this Binance FUD is that we have the Senate issuing this letter to Binance accusing them of several crimes, okay? This letter states that they are now investigating Binance over sanctions of evasion, money laundering, as you can see here, unlicensed money transmission, and concerns about its corporate structure. In this document, they come to the point of stating that Binance has facilitated over 10 billion in payments to criminals and to sanction invaders. These are some really crazy and serious accusations, with no reliable metrics or investigation to actually back this up, especially considering that the only sources they have here and throughout the entire document are basically news articles created by the media that so many times in the past has created articles that are far from accurate. And we just saw an example of that with this article from Forbes. In addition, as you can see here, it also mentions, for example, that Binance is attempting to evade anti-money laundering laws and securities laws and even QIC littered on this document, which I don't think is true at all. Completely not true, because in fact, Binance has been, during the last years, adopting a lot of those policies, even considering how inefficient and unnecessary they actually are, because since they have been applied, they have shown no effect, little to no effect in reducing the actual amount of money laundering happening. So yeah. Here, they even come to the point of stating that Binance created Binance US to draw attention away from of US regulators. But what? This is not true. This does not make sense at all, because they created Binance US exactly to comply with US regulations, because US regulations are just super limiting, okay? And to serve US customers and not do anything illegal, and serve it without any issues in a legal way, at least that was what they were going for. But clearly it's not that simple, because even with that approach, they are now having legal issues and being persecuted by regulators and politicians in the US. As rightly pointed out here in this document, in fact, Binance US offers a limited suite of products compared with Binance Global, but that is just to comply with the US regulations. They are limiting, and to make sure that they comply with the limits that the US government imposed to its own citizens, they just offer less products, because the other products are not available and not legal in the US, okay? But just because they are not legal in the US doesn't mean that the whole world needs to be limited. And if they are legal in other countries, it's good that Binance has this other institution, Binance Global, to actually offer these products to countries that can in fact use them. And that means there is a clear need for Binance Global. Now, it's curious just to see how complying with the US regulators still gets you in troubles. And it's just interesting to see that they never raised any kind of problems with FTX. And FTX had the same kind of structure. They had FTX Global and they had FTX US with different product offerings and supposedly different companies. So certainly curious to see there is a different standard between these two exchanges, and it's even more curious to see that later on this document they give the example of FTX to compare Binance. Okay, and it's curious because it almost seems like Binance FTX was just like a Trojan horse that is now an example that regulators can give to crack down on other cryptocurrency institutions and other cryptocurrency projects that don't serve their interests or the interests of the ones that made them the money. Who knows? Another argument is that Binance US and Binance are not independent entities because they are run by the same person, okay, which doesn't make much sense. Same person can run two different companies. Just look at Elon Musk that runs so many different companies, okay? And if their activities and the management are separated, like they are in this case, then they should definitely be considered independent, right? In fact, during this document, there are plenty of accusations to CZ as well, such as wanting no QIC, wanting everyone to be able to deposit their crypto and to have the right to withdraw it with no issues, regardless of sanctions and all those situations. This was all condemned by regulators, and it was not something they actually did. They just talked about it, I guess, in some messages they got. They just discussed the topic. No, but on my perspective, this would be just fair. These are two fair principles, and they are principles that, in fact, crypto is based on. They are the OG crypto principles, where people want to have actual control over their funds, and they don't want to be required to give their identity. They don't want to remain pseudonymous because you're not completely anonymous, and just have control over their assets without being questioned or censored. But even with these ideas and these principles, he's still bowing and following US regulators and by complying with the sanctions and also by introducing QIC into the platform because now Binance has QIC, but even that doesn't seem like enough for these regulators. And at the end of this letter, they just require a bunch of information about Binance to be delivered to regulators, such as personal information from individuals related with QIC. Okay, this was a document that was pushed by 3 senators, with the super anti-crypto senator Elizabeth Warren as in the forefront of this letter to Binance. Looking at all these documents and all these situations and all these crackdown from regulators and from the mainstream media, I just find it curious how fierce of an attack CZ and Binance have been getting, and in most cases without actual actually rightful and good arguments to sustain and to justify this kind of approach. It's also interesting to see how there is 2 standards and 2 measures. While there was no investigations, and then there was complete support of FTX, and in fact, and Sam Bankman-Fried, and in fact even had a huge support overall from politicians because of his donations, and he interacted regularly with them. There is on the other side, he is opposition to Binance and CZ. Okay, maybe it's that, maybe it's because Sam Bankman-Fried used to do a lot of donations to the political parties and to politicians, and he would have good relationships with them and have regular meetings, especially with policymakers such as Gary Gensler, and CZ does not, or does not do it as much. Or maybe just regulators are trying to show service by over-regulating and persecuting even companies after the huge FTX failure, but especially considering how bad they looked due to the good relationship they had with the founder. Or even maybe they are interested in play and US regulators are going after Binance to bring it down, to try to destroy competition, regulate it out of the market, and open the door to other companies to control the space. Okay. Other companies such as financial institutions that are moving into the crypto space, and out of the top of my head, I know 2 that are very interested in crypto, such as Blackrock and JP Morgan, and that would definitely love to take the place of Binance. Well, in my opinion, it's probably a mix of all of these. And I especially believe that there are many interests into play. Okay, and on my side, considering the actions of CZ so far, considering that it seems to be a crypto diehard with some very solid principles that are the principles of cryptocurrency, and someone that understands the value of cryptocurrencies, and it's not as willing to enter these games of favors, donations, that regulators and financial institutions usually play and enjoy. And because you would like crypto to be simple and anonymous and as secure as possible, and assuring that every user has similar rights, and not requiring things as QIC, and even considering that so far Binance has passed with flying colors to very intense periods of withdrawals with billions coming out of the exchange, and it was always able to process everything without each and without any issues, and also considering that they do the proof of reserves as well, and they are progressively trying to increase their transparency. I do believe we should support Binance and CZ. We need to support them as much as we can because they are heavily under attack by regulators, by financial institutions, by mainstream media, and because at the end of the day, if they fall, we'll take their place. An exchange that is owned and supported by JP Morgan or Blackrock. Coinbase on one side is getting almost controlled by Blackrock if you think about it. But at the end of the day, these institutions, these financial institutions, they are intimately connected and responsible for the current financial system that we have, and that is failing us, that is completely flawed, and that it's so flawed that it led to the creation of Bitcoin and to the creation of this entire industry and try this industry of the cryptocurrency, and of blockchain. That's definitely not the solution, because if those companies come in and they start taking care of taking control of things such as the major crypto exchanges and the way you can interact with the fiat money, they'll be able to basically set the rules. So that's why it's important to have Binance and other institutions like that are actually run by crypto diehards that understand the value of crypto and that want to actually fight for it. Until we have a better decentralized alternative, we need these crypto exchanges, and they better be run by people that understand crypto like CZ. And because Binance is a better alternative to anything that these financial institutions can offer, they are trying to bring it down, and it's up for us to support it. I do believe this, and that's why I wanted to also make this video, so we could also show some support to CZ, and just stand up for what is good and what is right, and stand up for the future of cryptocurrency. And whether we like it or not, the major exchange Binance will influence that a lot, and the people that will run the major exchanges will have a great influence in the future of crypto. If you enjoy this kind of analysis, please don't forget to subscribe and to turn on the notification bell. Okay, we're all about launching videos like this, so you definitely won't regret from subscribing, because you'll have a great amount of good content for you to watch. But of course, not all is doom and gloom. There are solutions coming in order to allow us to cash in our crypto in a more decentralized manner, and one of them is Melt. I don't know if you heard about them, but they are basically banking non-custodial protocol that allows you to get collateralized cash loans. Okay, everything through smart contracts, except for the fiat side, of course. And here I'll have a video explaining you more about Melt, and this should be the video you watch next. So I'll see you there.